Hello, and welcome to Canyon Professional Development. Please join us on a variety of social media platforms for new information, opportunities, coupon codes for courses, and much more. This 4-topic course is called Differentiation of Instruction to Support Standards Implementation. Topic 1, Unpacking the Standards. The purpose of this topic 1 is to enhance your understanding of how to find standards, unpack them, break them down in order to use them for instruction. The objectives for topic 1 are to identify the key components of a standard, to analyze grade level progressions, vertical alignment to ensure continuity, to dissect complex standards, unpack them, break them down into manageable subskills and/or learning objectives. And finally, how to create a lesson using these unpacked standards in order to help guide the students to master the standard. This section, although it refers to lesson planning, is not just about lesson planning. It's really the essential groundwork that must be laid before lesson planning can begin. So the standards are the knowledge and skills that students should possess at critical points in their educational pathway. These standards do not tell an educator how to reach the standard, and they are definitely not written in a manner for students to understand what they need to do in order to meet the standard. So we have to go through a process called unpacking the standard. The standards are delivered to us complete, each one like its own piece of sealed luggage. But before we can unpack the suitcase, unpack the standards, we have to find them. We have to understand how to open them or how to unpack them. So first, I will touch on where to find the standards and generally how to read them. In the course documents, there is a document called Resources. And on here, you will find several resources for state standards. I will provide and explain examples from the Arizona Department of Education. Those are linked right here. But I've also linked the National Center for Educational Statistics and Standards and some of the national organizations that have produced standards. So what we are looking at here are the beginning of the math standards. And you'll notice that math is divided up into these named domains, like the number system or expressions and equations, and then they have lettered abbreviations. Each of those domains, many of those domains are broken into major clusters, which are the circles, and supporting clusters. Those are the triangles. So clusters of similar content that belong under each domain. When you get into the standards portion, you'll notice that the numbered and lettered clusters on the far left are further broken into standards. So how to read this is you'll notice on the table in the background, the number 8 refers to the grade. EE refers to the domain of expressions and equations. A refers to the cluster, so the letter A itself doesn't have a meaning. It just means that all of the ones that start with A are under the same cluster. And then the 1 just is the numbering of the standards. It does not indicate specifically order or anything else, or when or where they have to be taught. It's just a way to keep track of them. This is an example of the Arizona English Language Arts, what ELA standard section might look like. And here there are strands. So in the tan row, you'll see something called Reading Standards for Literature. Though that is a strand, I've got a key down on the bottom. RL is for reading literature, RI is for reading informational text, and so on. Each of these strands is divided into a cluster, very similar to math. For instance, the clusters are in blue here: key ideas and details, and craft and structure. And then beneath each of those is the numbered standards. So 4 refers to the grade, RL refers to the strand. Underneath the cluster of key ideas and details, there's 1, 2, and 3. Again, the numbering system at the end is just to keep track of them. It does not It doesn't necessarily guide the order that things are taught in. You'll notice as we look at some of these standards, what are important parts of them. You'll notice that there are knowledge statements, meaning it tells us what the students should know. There are skill statements. There are things that explain what the student should be able to do. And in many of them, there'll be performance expectations, meaning the student has to be able to know and understand and do these things in order to master the standard. Notice that as you look at the standards, there are no assessment criteria. So standards are not about the assessment portion. This is an example of the core ideas for Arizona science standards. You'll notice that there are 4 physical science, 2 earth and space science, and 4 life science core ideas. These are basically really big knowledge statements that are broken down into smaller pieces in the standards. And then the bottom 3, the U1, 2, and 3, help us understand how those core ideas are used in science. More specifically, when you get into the science standards, they have a letter and numbering system very similar to the other ones that we have seen. Here we have K, which just stands for the grade, so it could be K1, 2, 3, etc. L stands for life science. 1 is the core idea that was on the previous slide, and U1 is the core idea of how to use science, U1. And again, number 6 just means that it's just number 6, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily taught before or after number 5. And finally, I have an example of the Arizona social science standards. Here I have a table of the anchor standards. So they've broken theirs down into the anchor standards, kind of like the core ideas of in science, the P1, E1, and L1, etc. These are broken down vertically. So if you look at the left-hand column, and then there's 4 rows below that. So there are 4 disciplinary and skill and processes core standards. There are 4 core civic standards, economics, geography, and history. So you'll notice that there's like these 4 major areas to the right, and then they put the first column are actually the skills and processes. And once again, they have a lettering and number system that's very similar. The first letters will be the grade, HS for high school, 1 for grade 1. And then notice in these 2 examples here, the middle box. So the one on the left is SP4, meaning that's the skills and processes anchor standard 4 here on the bottom left-hand corner. And then on the right, still high school, civics anchor standard 2, number 6. Finally, last time, the numbering at the end does not indicate the order. It's just a way to keep track of your standards. Also, you will notice that if you look in the actual written part of the standard here, it tells you what they should know and be able to do, but it does not indicate anything about assessment. So these standards, when you're reading standards, it is not telling you how to assess the mastery of the standard. So now I have briefly explained to you how to find the suitcase and how to look at the suitcase and understand the suitcase. I'm going to ask you to pause the video and navigate to the resource document and find your state standards using the links provided. So again, these resources, and if you're teaching in Arizona, you can navigate to the Arizona State Department of Education for their standards, or this national site. And with the national site, it has a map, and you can just click on your state, and it has all the links to that state's Department of Education, including their standards. After you've found the suitcase, the next section will be on how to actually open and unpack that suitcase. So go ahead and pause the video now and check out your standards. Now that you have found your standards, please know that the standards are the knowledge and the skills that they should possess, but they do not tell an educator how to reach the standard, like how you're going to get there. That's instruction. And they are definitely not written in a manner for students to understand what they need to do in order to meet the standard. Possibly you were reading some of them and were a little confused about what does this standard mean? What do I need? What does the student need to know and do? What do I need to know in order to be able to teach, guide the student to mastery? So we have to go through a process called unpacking the standard. So the standards are delivered to us complete, like each one is like its own piece of sealed luggage. We have to unpack them and separate out individual components so we, as expert educators, can decide how we will support students in mastering the standard. In order to do this, we have to identify the components of the standard, which typically encompass the three parts: the know, the knowledge, the content, what they have to do, the skill, and then what they should really understand, how that standard fits into the larger arc of an entire unit or an entire semester or an entire year. And that's where our expertise of full understanding really comes into play. So the main purpose of unpacking the standard is really to identify the key components and what that means for instruction. So I ask you, if you've taught already, have you ever had a student who was in your class and you either at the beginning or you were in a unit and they seemed unprepared for the current grade or the current content level? If so, you have a good understanding of the importance of what's called vertical alignment. Vertical alignment is understanding the big picture of how skills and processes build and knowledge build on one another from content area to content area, grade to grade, unit to unit. Having a grasp of that big picture really ensures continuity throughout the grade levels. So you may be a fourth grade teacher and you really know your standards, but you also need to understand the grades and their standards before you and after you, so you're not sending an unprepared student to the next grade. So really the importance of understanding the vertical alignment and understanding student needs, it really creates a smoother transition through the grades. This is one example of how states might kind of give you an overview of how standards, at least the core ideas, are distributed. They all don't have charts like this, but many of them do. And this would be important to know. For instance, let's say I was teaching fifth grade. So look in the table along the top, K through 8, then high school, and find the 5. And let's just say I was teaching in core idea number P1, physical science. All matter in the universe is made of very small particles. And look at that, the fifth grade block is colored in. But notice that third and fourth are blank. That means that students have not directly experienced this core idea in the standards since second grade. I need to take that into consideration as I'm teaching this. I can't just assume that they, have recent knowledge of it. And I also need to know what was taught in second grade, so I build upon what they were expected to master in second grade. And furthermore, notice from 5th to 6th grade, the color gets a little darker. This tells me that this core idea, this portion of the standards are more heavily addressed in 6th grade. So it's really important for me to understand as a 5th grade teacher what the expectations for 6th grade are, so I can make sure my students are prepared as they enter 6th grade for this specific core idea. Again, the importance of understanding this is ensuring consistency in student learning outcomes. I have to know what my students are coming to me with, and I have to be prepared to deliver students to the next grade with what the skills and knowledge that they need. I do have some examples of how to look more closely. So that last one was just a color-coded table of the progression of core ideas. But we really need to look at specific standards and notice how they spiral on top of one another and how they build on one another. So I have an example here, and this is in the course documents. I'm going to ask you to pause shortly and go find this document. And let's just look here at this table. On the left, I have grade level, and then to the right, it says the standard. And just look at those first two rows, 3rd grade and 4th grade, and I have essentially The same standard that's represented in 3rd and 4th grade, reading literature, 3rd grade number 1, and reading literature, 4th grade number 1. 3rd grade, ask and answer questions to demonstrate the understanding of a text, referring explicitly to the text as the basis for the answers. Whereas in 4th grade, refer to details and examples in a text when explaining what the text says explicitly and when drawing inferences from the text. So notice, in the same lane, but more complicated, more complex. As we move over to the right, this is where I, as a teacher, now I look backwards and what is this standard building on? Where is this building on in 2nd grade? And so I have to understand what I'm building upon in 2nd grade. And then if I go to the last column in the right, I have to understand what I am addressing in 3rd grade, what that is preparing the students for in 4th grade. I'm going to ask you in a moment here to pause the video and navigate to the Aligning Standards Across Grade Levels document. I want you to review the examples that I've given you here. There are examples for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade for the same standard. And then I would like you to choose a standard that you teach. I would like you to put it in, let's say, the middle row here, and then go ahead and find the standard before it in the grade level previous. And again, be careful if I, maybe if I'm looking at a 4th grade standard, it may not have been, addressed in 3rd grade. Maybe the last time it was in 2nd grade. That's usually not true in things like ELA and math, but science and social science, the arts and physical science, physical education, those sometimes skip. So you have to be really careful. So I'd like you to choose the standard, find the supporting standard, and then the next standard in the next grade level. Take the time to describe how it relates to the previous standard, and then also how it prepares students for the next one. This might take a little bit of time, so please pause the video and come back to me when you're ready. Welcome back. After going through that exercise, you might be a little overwhelmed thinking, oh my goodness, these standards are kind of complicated. They are. They are written in a language that's not necessarily student-friendly, definitely not student-friendly, and sometimes challenging for teachers to understand, if you try to digest it as an entire standard. So this is where the true breaking down comes in. It's making the standards more manageable. We're going to take individual standards and break them into sub-skills and learning objectives. And some of those standards have multiple skills involved and multiple learning objectives. It's not about making the standard itself smaller. It's about isolating teachable pieces within the larger picture of mastery. Think about the picture here with the standard as a boulder. It's instead of carrying the entire boulder, it's breaking it into rocks and carrying each individual rock. But I'm not diminishing the standard itself. Once I have broken it down into manageable pieces, I then have to take a look and prioritize them. Some of the objectives or skills need to be taught before other ones within the same standard. So I have to break them down and then prioritize them and put them in order. Some of them are for foundational building blocks that if the student does not master that foundational block, the other parts of the standard are not reachable. Another way of thinking about breaking things down instead of the boulder, with a pickaxe is like a cow. We're going to chew the cow's cud. So I really like thinking about the cud, but you'll notice it's KUD instead of CUD. K stands for knowledge, what students must know. U is for the overall understanding, and D is for do. Knowledge, this is like the content, vocabulary, concrete things they have to know or memorize or fully know. Do is the skill. It's the how they are going to use this information. You, again, is kind of that overarching understanding. I'm going to give an example on the next few slides on how this looks to identify the CUD in a standard. So I'm going to go back to RL3, so fourth grade reading literature, number 3. The number 3 is meaningless here. Describe in depth a character, setting, or event in a story or drama, drawing on specific details in the text. That's a lot going on there. So I need to take a look at this, and I have to identify what students have to know to be able to do this. Well, I can see 3 things. They have to know what a character is. They have to be able to identify characters. They have to be able to identify and know what the setting is. They have to be able to identify settings. And they have to identify separate actions, the events within the story. So those are actual knowledge. They have to know those things in these vocabulary terms. What do they have to be able to do with this information? They have to find evidence. They have to be able to make inferences, so combine details. They have to be able to describe, they have to use their language for these descriptions, and they have to clearly communicate what they found. So all of these items are pulled out of that one sentence standard above. Now here's the tricky part, the overall understanding. You as an expert and probably very passionate about the topic and content you teach, you come from the position of understand. So we as teachers oftentimes are addressing the standards from the understand perspective. We understand why it's important to be able to make an inference and how to do that. We understand what character development does for a story and how language is used to develop a character. We understand how, what the character does, the events, the scenes, how that connects to the broader theme of the story. And that's what we want. We want students to understand these things. However, if we don't concretely teach them what they need to know and what they need to do, they will never fully get to the understand. So this may feel tedious to kind of back up from the major understanding and break it down to know and do. But once you do this in detail for your anchor standards, it will become much more clear to you how to write your learning objectives. And then it makes assessment much easier because your assessment aligns with your objectives, which align with the standard. So that's the whole purpose here. We need to chew the cud. We have to break this giant, it's one sentence, but it's really a giant standard down into these individual parts. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to pause the video and find 2 documents. There's a template called Know, Understand, Do, Breaking Down a Standard, which is a template for you to practice chewing the cud. I'm going to ask you to go to your standards, one of the state standards that was identified in the previous slides from the resources. Pick an anchor standard, like a big one that's really important, and break it down into what students need to be able to know, what they'd be able to do, and really what your big understanding is for each of those parts and how it ties into the overall arc of a unit. If you have difficulty doing this, it can be difficult to do it the first time. I do have some examples of know, do, and understand statements. So that document is called Examples of Know, Understand, and Do Statements. And this will just give you some wording ideas of how to differentiate what they need to know versus what they need to do. So know, just think of, it's not always memorization, but it might be an easy way to think about it. And do is really the action, what they're going to do with that knowledge. The understand may and likely is not stated directly in the standard, but it is how you as an adult with deep knowledge think about the standard. So go ahead and take a long pause and break down one of your main standards into know, understand, and do, and come back when you're ready. The final step in this portion is really how you use the know, understand, and do statements to create learning progressions. And it's really a map of skill development within a standard. So once you break down once you've discovered or unpacked the know and do of each standard, you can start to put them in order. And in outlining the simpler skills into the more complex skills. These skills must be linked together, and your direction is guided by formative assessment, meaning you guide the student to the knowledge, you teach them how to use that knowledge, and then you perform formative assessment to understand if they've accomplished that to move forward. So we want to move them from simple to complex tasks. When we do this, we're not going to break down every single sub-skill, but really the major levels of student understanding as they advance through the skills of your standards. The formative assessment tells you when the students are ready to move on to the next more complex skill. So remember back in the beginning when I was emphasizing the numbers on the standards, many people falsely assume that those numbers are the order that the standards need to be taught in. They are not. They can represent progressions, but sometimes, number 6 needs to come before number 2. It is your job to figure out that order, or your district or school might already have the map planned out, but they may not. So what does this look like? I have provided an example plan that takes one standard, unpacks the sub-skills, and then takes those skills and puts them in order of lesson planning. The example I'm using here is RL31, ask and answer questions to demonstrate understanding of a text, referring explicitly to the text as the basis for the answers. So I need to understand the skills involved here. And I've identified 3 skills. They have to be able to identify key ideas and details in a text. They have to be able to ask and answer questions about main topic and details. And they have to use textual evidence to support their answers. Once I've unpacked those 3 skills, I can now write my learning objectives and plan some lessons. You can find this document in the course documents. It's called Example Lesson Plans aligned with Unpacked Standards. And what I've done here is I've taken each sub-skill, so here's sub-skill 1, and turned it into Lesson Plan 1, identifying key ideas and details in a text. And then I further broke them down into the learning objectives. They have to be able to do 2 things. They have to identify the main topic of a text, and they have to be able to identify the key details that support the main topic. From there, I can organize activities and learning experiences for them to reach those objectives, which is one part of that standard. Notice this is really just focusing on the skills, the things they have to be able to do. At this point, it doesn't matter the content that I'm using, as long as it's grade level appropriate or readiness appropriate. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to pause the video and navigate to that document, the example lesson plans, and just take a look at how this is organized. And then I want you to go back to the lesson plan you broke down into the know, understand, and do statements, and start to look at how each of those, the sub-skills can be broken into learning objectives. And this is 3 lesson plans from that one standard. So I guess another thing to make sure you understand is that one standard does not represent one lesson. Some standards might take a week or more. Some standards might be addressed in a day. Some standards might be addressed over weeks at a time, little bit by little bit, as learning is progressing. Let's go ahead and pause the video and take a look at one of the standards that you have unpacked and start to sketch out what the lesson plan might look like. As we conclude topic 1, there are several sets of discussion questions for you to discuss with your team. And these can be found in the Course syllabus documents. One, understanding the standards. How do standards inform your lesson planning and practices? What challenges do you face in accessing and even understanding the standards? What challenges do you face in aligning the standards across grade levels? Do you have the time? Do you get to interface with the other grade level teachers and understand, how they're addressing the standards? Do you even know what standards are above and below your grade level? And unpacking the standards, how can you ensure that your lessons and activities are effectively addressing each unpacked standard? So please take the time with your team to discuss these questions, and it will help to open up conversations to ensure that you are, thinking about vertical alignment and addressing standards in a way that students can understand. So in topic 1, we were able to identify the key components of a standard. We analyzed grade level progressions and vertical alignment. We dissected or unpacked complex standards into subskills and learning objectives, and saw a lesson framework that outlines the steps needed in order to master a standard.